Hello, good morning or good afternoon to everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. I can see a few people are just logging in, so we'll give it a minute or two for people to get settled, and then we'll get started. Thank you. Okay, so let's get started. Hello and welcome to today's webinar, Rethink Your Employee Experience with Beezy, Microsoft Viva and Core. I'm really looking forward to this one with all the MS Viva goodies that David and Eamon are going to talk about today. So my name is Josh Carey. I work in the marketing department here at Beezy, and I will be your webinar moderator for today. So you are all very lucky people. So before we get started, we have some quick housekeeping rules for you. Thanks, Eamon. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to submit them through the GoToWebinar panel, which is located on your right-hand side. At the end of this webinar, we will have a live Q&A session for around 10 to 15 minutes, depending on how the time goes. So we will try to answer as many of your questions as possible. And if we don't have time to answer your questions, then we will of course reach out to you via email. We do have some polls during today's webinar, so we'd love if you could take part in them. We will be sharing all the results live during this webinar. The webinar will be on demand, so we will be sending you an email with the link tomorrow. So maybe you want to go over the webinar again, or you just want to forward it to another colleague. So without further ado, I am now going to hand over to David and Eamon to introduce themselves. So thank you, and over to you, David.
Thanks, Josh. So yeah, my name's David Fletcher. My official title is Sales Director for Beezy, but I've been with Beezy a long time in pretty much every guise. So helped with a lot of customer success, some project management, but mainly, of course, helping customers choose Beezy and really helping them to understand the landscape. And personally, I've been building or been part of intranet, SharePoint intranet solutions since 2008, and joined Beezy, I think, about 5 years ago. So been here quite a while.
Thanks, Dave. Good afternoon, and again, I'll reiterate Josh's comment. You're all very welcome to our webinar on Beezy, Viva and Core and how we can rethink the employee experience. So my name's Eamon McGann. I'm the Solutions Director here at Core. Have been involved in internet solutions like Dave for a long time, actually nearly 20 years, and a lot of that has been SharePoint, different versions on-prem, online. And I think one of the key things for me over the last 5 years working with Dave and the team at Beezy, I've had the pleasure of delivering a lot of high value, high impact digital workplace solutions. And I think the interesting thing today is how we can take the experience and the technology that's coming through Viva and match that with Beezy. So we're going to see some cool stuff today. Before we jump into the main body, I'm going to ask Josh to open up our first poll so we can start getting some feedback on kind of where some of your experiences are. And we're also very keen to make sure that we're relevant to the content and the things you guys want to see as well today. So Josh, I'm also, by the way, just going to go off camera for bandwidth reasons. I'm going to turn my camera off, but I'm also going to hand over to Josh to help us with the poll.
Yep, no problem, Eamon. Thanks for that. So which of the 4 Viva Microsoft Viva modules interests you the most? So we have topics, connections, learning, and insights. So I'll give people 30 seconds just to answer that question. I can see the results coming in. And then I'm going to share the results live with everyone. and then I'll get Dave and Eamon to comment on that. Okay, give it an extra 10 seconds. I can see some last people voting. Okay, I'm going to close the poll and then I'm going to share the results on the screen. So these are the results that we have, David and Eamon. Just any kind of initial kind of comments there from you guys?
Believe it or not, they're not showing up on my screen, so I'm a little bit I'm in the dark. So I'll leave you to that. For some reason, it's been disappeared.
Yeah, most people are most interested in connection. So yeah, I'm surprised by that, but well, not surprised, but yeah, interested, I suppose.
Cool. So unfortunately, I can't see the results. So so David, just as so connections is the top one in there, is it?
Yeah, by far and away. So insights is second, and then topics and learning joint third, I suppose. But yeah, connections is far and away the one that people are most interested in.
Interesting, cool. Yeah, I mean, that would kind of correlate to the experiences we've been having over the last 4 or 5 months. So that kind of very much matches with the customers we've been talking to. So cool. Thank you for that. So we'll come back to some of those polls and some of the kind of extra information as we go through the session this morning. So I think one of the first things and one of the kind of jobs I have this morning before I hand over to Dave is just positioning Core, what we do, and kind of where Viva holistically fits. And for me, when we look at Microsoft Viva and we look at its mission statement, which is empowering every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more, I think that's quite a broad statement. But what encourages me behind this statement is actually, if you look at the fabric of Microsoft as an organization, and we as a Microsoft partner work very closely with our colleagues at Microsoft. And Satya Nadella, the CEO, has been pushing a culture at Microsoft in terms of how they operate and the software they write, that's all around, you know, culture and applying technology to help shape the culture of work. So it's been a huge emphasis of his on any blogs, anything you see him talking about. And we see Viva as one of the kind of incarnations of that coming to fruition. You know, as we're all kind of transitioning out of what has been a fairly interesting 18 months, you know, across the globe, we're all trying to struggle with how we get back to traditional working models, hybrid models, where location matters not as much as it used to. Ironically, I was on site myself yesterday with a manufacturing organization, and it was a very interesting dynamic between those that could remote work and a manufacturing piece that, you know, how much we had to protect ourselves against COVID and so on. So the world is really adapting to a new model. And I think the launch of Viva really is a game changer in this space. You know, Microsoft themselves at the heart of what they're doing are saying, you know, let's make sure that technology helps us reshape as we move forward. And for me personally, having been involved in a lot of Microsoft waves of technology, this to me is the real start of something very exciting with the technology and what Microsoft are trying to do with it. So there are 3 objectives that Microsoft would suggest it sits under the covers with Viva. Firstly, that it's about helping organizations respond to what's been going on over the last 18 months, recover and move forward from that, and then rebuild. So kind of the 3 R's: respond, recover, and rebuild. And ultimately, one of the kind of key things is the drive for these technologies. You know, there's a lot of research out there, you know, and a lot of this research has really highlighted that it's no surprise that people are the major asset in a lot of organizations. And, you know, the technology and how people perceive technology, particularly millennials onwards, really does have an impact on their engagement, their retention, and the overall success. And here's some stats that Microsoft have done a lot of research on over the last 2 years or so. Glint, their survey highlights that 12 times employees who are engaged are 12 times least likely to leave an organization. You know, everything I'm hearing is about the shortage that there is out there worldwide. So engaging employees is a vital thing, and almost everybody we are talking to sees and understands the need for that. I think the second stat I'd like to pull out is about learning and development. And that was, you know, not huge on the list of things that people put out there on the poll a few minutes ago, but we are hearing about learning and development and how that is having a big impact on people in terms of how engaged they feel with an organization and how much actually they want to stay in an organization. LinkedIn Learning suggesting that it's 94% say that they will stay where they feel a clear investment in their own personal learning and development, and not just a tacit involvement in that, but a very belt and braces learning as part of our culture. So, clearly culture, engaging employees is extremely important, but equally, what are the things we need to be doing? What are the elements of an employee experience tool that we need to be aware of? And again, some research that Microsoft did in terms of what kind of the key pillars of the technology and what we should be trying to achieve. Well-being was one of the first key ones, that in what's been a very challenging time, the well-being, that we feel safe at work, that physically and mentally and emotionally we're being taken care of at work and we feel valued. Connection, I think is true whether it's remote, hybrid, or whatever models we might be moving towards, but being connected, being trusted, and being part of what are in most cases quite diverse communities, that having that quality of a relationship. We've all probably lost the water cooler type scenario that we've had historically, and that needs to be recreated in some shape or form to help us collaborate and move forward. Focus, understanding what to prioritize. So it's not all about experience, it is about actually getting our job done. So focus and empowerment come together, really about giving people tools and resources so they can find information. I think if I've had one experience of using some of the Microsoft collaboration technology, is getting information in and out of those technologies, finding the information quickly and easily is kind of one of the key things we get asked for repeatedly. Finally, moving a little bit back towards the overall employee experience, the empowerment, the growth, the learning and skills, and just being part of the wider organization. They're all key factors that people said matter to them, and they expect it to be part of the overall culture and driven through the kind of tools that people expect to be using. So Viva is all about trying to address those 6 pillars, those 6 key elements of employee experience. And it does that in 4 tools, and you've all given us a quick high-level overview of your kind of interest in the Viva tools. But for those on the call, we want to clarify what are the tools and what they do. And I think one of the most important things that I get asked often when people look at Viva or Viva Connections or Viva Insights, is it one tool, is it multiple tools? I think it's a platform of tools, and people can use the bits of the tools they feel appropriate, that they are licensed for, it's about it being modular, and that's very much again where we feel Beezy comes in, about extending the parts of Viva that you want to use and extending that functionality, and Dave will go into a fair bit of detail on that as we go through. So there are 4 key components. First of all, we've the connections component, which is really my focus for today, and it's also, by the sounds of it, everybody else's focus. It's where we're seeing the most demand right now. There is clear demand for some of the other elements, but connections is the key thing. And connections is the heart of communication and collaboration for the organization. It's the gateway to the modern experience. It's the bit where we will actually drive a lot of the other Viva capability through. So connections is really the hub of the Viva product, and it is about bringing products like SharePoint, Teams, and Yammer into one single cohesive experience. Insights, which also had a lot of interest, that's really Satya's goal about personal and organization productivity, driving that through Viva. And one thing I will say, Connections is part of most standard licensing. So if you're licensed for SharePoint, you're licensed for Viva Connections. Viva Insights is an additional license. Well, part of it isn't, but depending on what part of Viva Insights you look at, and we're not really going to be delving into too much detail in today's session, but there is additional licensing required, and we're seeing Insights being aimed at particular organizations. So the low level of Insights really is ubiquitous for every organization, but as we get into the more manager insights and leader insights, Microsoft are particularly aiming that towards people who are using workplace analytics and those kind of tools. So if you're already licensed in that space, then Insights is an obvious progression. If you're not, then that's a slightly different discussion. The next piece is Viva Topics. I find this personally very interesting. I've worked in document management and SharePoint for many, many years, and I think Viva Topics is about unlocking knowledge in your organization using a good mixture of AI and a good mixture of document curation. So it's really about stop reinventing the wheel with documents all the time, find knowledge, find expertise, and join those two together. So some pretty cool tools in Viva Topics. And Viva Learning, and by the way, sorry, Viva Topics is an additional license fee on top of your standard E3 or E5. So there is an additional license fee for Topics. Viva Learning, currently the base is not an additional license, and it really is the beginning of bringing learning into the fabric of what we do day in, day out. It will allow us to connect to sources like LinkedIn Learning or Microsoft Learn, and you can connect to other sources of learning content that you may subscribe to, like Cornerstone, and consume that content. So they're the four kind of key pillars. Before I move on to just focusing on connections for a moment, one thing I do want to say is that we at Core always add the fifth pillar, which we believe kind of belongs. It's not strictly speaking part of Viva itself, but it's very linked to Viva, and that's SharePoint Syntex. And SharePoint Syntex is a content processing and a document processing technology, which really is about taking the power of your documents, getting real solid metadata from your documents, and applying that to process, so you can now find out more about what's going on in your key documentation and use that to drive process. So document-centric, document-heavy, document processing organizations who are already using the Microsoft platform will get a lot of benefit from using SharePoint Syntex. Again, however, though, it is an additional license fee. So it's a bit of a mixed bag in terms of what's in here are technologies that are both becoming available right now. So Viva was launched back in February. So some of this technology is coming at us right now. Some of it's being deployed out to the end of the year. Some of it's including your license, some of it isn't. And that makes it a little bit more complicated in terms of what the roadmap is. And potentially maybe in the Q&A later, if people have questions on that, we can come back to kind of where the products are and so on. So we'll come back to that. I think that's probably a good segue to pass this back to you again, Josh, to have a look at maybe the next poll.
Yep, sure, Eamon. Let me just get that poll up for everyone. I'm going to launch it now. So yeah, the next question is, what is your current state with Microsoft Viva? So I'll let you read through the answers there and then give people time to vote. Just up to 50% of people voted, so I'll give it 20 extra seconds. We're up to 60 something odd percent now of people. Last 10 seconds, and then I'll close it. Hopefully, Eamon, you'll be able to see the results this time.
Not playing ball for me today for whatever reason. It was there a minute ago, but as soon as I started presenting, it disappeared. So apologies, I can't see that screen. I'm going to leave Dave to go. Ooh, it just popped up. Oh.
Just going to share the results.
You see the name?
So it came and went there for a millisecond. I'm not sure what's happening there, so unfortunately not. But
in the lead is interested in implementing MS Viva in the near future. That's 45% of respondents. Second to that is have another experience platform in place, or another employee experience and platform in place. The first one, not on Microsoft 365 and therefore don't have Viva, had nobody. So that's good news. Everyone here is in the right webinar. And then the other two that are kind of even are not looking to implement Viva at the moment or already using some of the Viva modules. So those two fall in last, but by far and away, again, in the lead is interested in implementing Viva in the near future.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. I think an interesting part of the organizations that are potentially using other experiences, one of the unique things, and maybe I'm going to come up in the Q&A later, but one of the things Microsoft are positioning with Viva is that it's trying to bring a lot of what would be separate technology in employee experience platforms and bringing it into one platform. So we just can see whether that's something that people feel are valid as we go through the session. Okay, so I'm going to spend just a couple of minutes talking about connections, and then really what I want to do is hand over to Dave to talk us through connections and then the rest of the tools and where Beezy can drive that forward. So Viva Connections itself, it's the area that we're all interested in today. It's the kind of key thing. And for me, it is the area that we're absolutely seeing the most interested in. And we're already pretty committed with a number of customers, both large and small in scale and size, looking at how connections will have an impact on their future. So it really is the hub, as I said before. It's about making it easier to contribute, easier to kind of join in with the wider company vision. And I think the challenge Microsoft have had historically, not just now, is they have a lot of tools to help people communicate and collaborate. And sometimes that's been the confusion. Which one should I be using and when should I be using it? So we've got SharePoint, Yammer, Teams, and so on. Connections is really the first time that Microsoft are trying to bring that into one technology and trying to streamline the Yammer experience, the Teams experience, and the SharePoint experience, all branded under the Teams engagement, so running it directly from within Teams. And to be really clear, this isn't brand new technology. This has been around now for some time. You know, we've had teasers. The SharePoint home sites concept came out a couple of years ago, or certainly was announced a couple of years ago and was launched about a year ago. And then the Yammer community app. So we've had little teasers of this. And the evolution of this is the employee home app that we now have in Viva Connections. And in short, and Dave will show this in a little bit more detail shortly, but in short, we've really got three functions that we're driving through Viva Connections. We've got a resources function where we're going to link to other content. So we're going to have curated navigation, dynamic news, frequently visited sites, so that kind of stuff delivered. And that's an extension of what we already have in something like the SharePoint home site. The company feed is really the slightly newer piece that we see in here, and this is around much more personalized news. And again, I think this is something we can enhance with Beezy, and Dave will be talking about. And it is a mix of both curated and driven information, user-driven information, but also targeted and AI-driven. So some pretty cool stuff in here. And then finally, dashboards. I think Dave will probably be talking about this a little bit later, but the idea of activity cards is something Beezy's been talking about for many, many, many years. And we now see this coming to fruition through the application. And so dashboard is a cool function, but in our Beezy world, not something new for us, something we've been doing for a long, long time. So it's good to see that coming through Connections, but it's also good to understand how we can improve upon that experience and take more from that experience. Really, Connections is about, you know, becoming a simple single source and being able to allow people to navigate from there. So I'm going to jump in and show a vision of the future. And I think it's important to do this because what's really important about what I'm going to show over the next couple of minutes, 1 or 2 minutes, is this is not what's available right now. This is what's available, this is what Connections will look like by the end of the year or even into early next year. So Viva, yeah, and this has puzzled some of our customers. Microsoft made big announcements that Viva Connections was available and launched back in February and March and April. But in reality, some of the new functionality actually isn't in place yet, in particular dashboard. So there are private previews of some of this technology, but in principle, this is stuff. And I think what Dave is going to show is how we take the power of what's in Beezy right now and what's in Connections right now. So Connections is available, just not exactly what you're seeing on screen. Dave will give us a sneak preview of that and also a preview of how Beezy can extend that. But the kind of concepts is really what I want to get across in this next minute or so. So firstly, you know, we've got an example here where we have a company called Recloud. Viva is delivered in Teams, so it's now delivered as a targeted app in Teams. It's pinned to the top of Teams, and it's customized and personalized to you based on your role and your location. You can see that there are the three functions here, and you'll see them separately in here as well, in both the mobile experience and the full client experience. And the feed in particular is about announcements, conversations, keeping you in the know, keeping you connected to important announcements from your team, from your company, and starting to bring Yammer in. So for those of you who've used Yammer, maybe struggle with Yammer, there's a discussion around, does Yammer fit, or is there a better way of doing this? But you know, this is what Connections is ultimately trying to help us understand. I think one of the key important things for both Connections and Beezy is this information. We can take this from Microsoft Graph and we can personalize, so it doesn't even have to be from within the Office 365 suite of content. We can take this information from anywhere, and it is really about targeting that information, that activity to the right person. The piece which I say is coming, and it's the piece we've been doing in some shape or form in Beezy now for a long time, is the dashboard. So for me, this is the type of functionality that changes this from being a news-fed, conversational fed tool to one that's really practical to help you do your job. So in here we see an example of dashboards where it's actually starting to give us some inputs in terms of tasks. So you need to do your COVID check, you've got some time off coming. So tasks, those kind of key things are kind of being driven through the dashboard. We also have the opportunity to drive other connections to other Viva areas. So whether it be Viva Insights, Viva Learning, we can drive some information. Again, I think, Dave, you're going to talk about how Beezy can accelerate that as well. So this is about connecting people, making sure people understand where they're getting their information. We'll be able to do that in a mobile experience. So whether it's iOS, whether it's Android, that will be a unified experience. I think the final comment on the mobile experience is that we're driving that dashboard functionality. So like the example we just highlighted, if you've got front-end workers or frontline workers, that we can drive things like Microsoft Shifts or any of your kind of ERP applications, we can drive tasks into the dashboard, onto the handheld device, onto the BYOD device, and keep it as personalized as we possibly can. So I think a lot of what I'm showing is what's coming. I think what I now need to do is hand over to Dave, and he's going to talk us through really where it is now and where Beezy fits in with this. So Dave, with that, I'll hand over to you. We have another poll, but I think from a time point of view, Josh, we may hold on that poll, see how we're getting on towards the back end.
No problem, Eamon. Dave, do you want me to hand over, or are you going to take?
Yeah, I've done it. So I just need to make sure it's allowing me to show my right screen.
And before you start, Dave, I'll just let you know the last poll is about, if you haven't started with MS Viva, what is the biggest thing holding you back? So if you have time, just let me know and I'll launch that poll. That's the final poll.
Sorry about that. It was not letting me choose the right screen. So hopefully you can see my screen now. It says Beezy and Microsoft Viva. Yep. Okay, good. So yeah, Eamon's done what Microsoft do, right? He showed you the cool stuff that's coming, and I have to bring you back down to earth and show you what's really here today. So yeah, no, it's exciting. So firstly, I think we want to talk a little bit about where does Beezy play in this space? And for us, we were back in the day, we were an ESN, right? We were an enterprise social network for SharePoint, and this was 2011. And then Microsoft announced all sorts of wonderful technology. So since 2011 to today, we've pivoted an awful lot. We've had to constantly change the integrations, the API calls. You know, we talk about when Link came in, we had to get presence indicators for Link, and we had to use instant messaging. And then, of course, it pivoted to Skype. And these kind of changes happen in the Microsoft world all the time. And for us, it's what we do, right? We're a product. So as a product, we have to take in and bake in all the wonderful fertile ground that is Microsoft. So this slide is one of my favorites to really reiterate that. If you look at even 4 or 5 years ago, this little slide here, this GIF, this animation will show you what was important, right? It was all about SharePoint starting to move to the cloud. It was about OneDrive. It was about Skype. It was about, in some cases, some of the modern types of SharePoint site. For a short period of time, it was about something called Infopedia. And it was about the ability to try and connect all of these pieces. And then Microsoft invested and they brought out Flow. And Flow opened up a lot of opportunities for us. And then they brought out the Office Graph and, of course, Delve and how that all worked. And for us, every time Microsoft do this and they release this kind of surge of new technology, it's extremely exciting. You know, you look at the Office Graph and Delve, and realistically, a lot of what we're seeing in Viva today is born out of that, right? It's born out of Project Cortex, it's born out of Delve, it's born out of the Office Graph, it's born out of SharePoint Syntax, which of course Eamon mentioned. And Beezy's been working with these products for quite some time. You know, when the modern search framework was announced, it was very exciting because search is a pain point for every intranet. And because Beezy is totally native to our customers' environment, we started to hook into modern search. We found all these quick wins that, you know, we didn't have to do anything for. And then Teams came out. Again, very exciting. Teams came out. Well, Beezy created a Teams app, you know, Beezy instance inside of Teams, which, let's be honest, that's what Connections is today. So we've kind of always had to pivot and move with Microsoft, but that's what we want. We decided to build our product in the Microsoft arena for this very reason. You look at a lot of our competitors and they went down the kind of open source route, or maybe did Umbraco or WordPress or something that is maybe outside but still hooked into the Office 365 ecosystem. And Beezy really said, no, we want to maintain completely within the Microsoft ecosystem. But as you can see here, and as Eamon alluded to 2 or 3 years ago, we noticed a trend. So in every RFP that we got, like, and bear in mind, Microsoft doesn't get RFPs, right? They don't get RFPs for intranets. We do, the vendors do. So we noticed, oh, we need Salesforce integration. We need Workday. We need SuccessFactors or ServiceNow. All these different products need to come into our intranet in a way that makes sense, what we call meaningful integration. So Beezy had to do with this, right? So we gave a talk at Ignite, it was 3 years ago, Microsoft Ignite, about the employee experience. The title of the talk was the employee experience. And it's really validating to hear that Microsoft is recognizing that this is the way the market's turned, and they've invested, because it makes our life a hell of a lot easier when they're doing things for us. And this is a very busy slide. It's an extremely busy slide, but it gives you an idea of the kind of level that we have to consider. You know, we have customers that are 100, 200, 250,000 users. Now, 250,000 user organization has a very specific set of needs. They don't want a one size kind of fits all. You know, they use SuccessFactors or Workday or ServiceNow. They need everything to be smart and intelligent. They want integration with the Office Graph. They want search to be targeted to them. So we have already been building this into the product. We have things called topics, channels, and audiences in our product that really start to make sure that the experience for the user is completely personalized. And then about 18 months ago, we released a feature called Global Local, which again kind of enhances that. Now, Microsoft announcing Viva not only was validation, but allows a lot of what we were trying to do, make it a lot easier, but also in some cases possible. There was a few things we wanted to do that we simply couldn't. One of them is the learning piece, which I'll come on to in a moment, but we got so many requests to build integrations with Microsoft Fuse, with Workday, with different systems that were the learning, LinkedIn Learning, for example. So when Microsoft bought that, that was very exciting for us as well. But we had so many requests, and it wasn't particularly easy to do it in a way that made sense. Not as easy as some of the other products. So that's kind of why, when we sort of, particularly topics, when we saw this, we were very, very excited. And one thing that Microsoft has always been is a platform, and Eamon said it there himself. Now, Connections is a really good example of this. Connections doesn't exist. There's nothing there unless you have something behind it. So if you have a really cool intranet or a SharePoint home site, or then Connections is cool. It has all the data that's coming from that. Now, one of the things that as a platform, what Microsoft do, what Office 365 is, and what Viva do, is they give you all the different parts. And a solution like Beezy tries to bring those parts into a way that's meaningful for your users. So Connections is trying to also do that, right? It's now saying, well, we can consolidate it, but you have to have that. So if you just turn on Connections today, and I've done this in 3 different environments that we have, and you don't have an intranet, then Connections doesn't have any content, right? But if you have a SharePoint intranet or a custom SharePoint intranet or a Beezy instance, then all of a sudden Connections is very, very powerful, and it starts to give you information that's relevant. The Office graph kicks in, your targeting becomes more powerful. So for us, we've always kind of relied on the platform. We don't exist without the platform. So for us, the Office 365 platform is something that we rely on. And if Microsoft are not doing what they do, then our job becomes stale and we don't improve as a product. So the harmony is something that's very, very important for us. Why are we excited? Well, Microsoft have announced to us, we knew this was coming, right? So we knew that this was happening, and they showed us how they were envisaging this, what the vision was for them, what Viva really meant, and particularly when they talk about Connections. So we very much were aware that this was coming. Now, there's some things in there. So for example, Eamon mentioned we've been having the newsfeed for a while. We've been pulling in different systems. Well, we use the adaptive card framework, and the adaptive card framework is Microsoft's framework. It's the way that they build all of these cards. So all of these cards use the adaptive card framework. So when Microsoft announced Connections, it made our life easier, because you're saying, well, the Connections that the adaptive card framework we're already using, we can still use, but now there's more options. So instead of having to manually configure this through Flow every time for every product, Microsoft is giving us quicker steps. Now, there are some things most things I think about Viva are fantastic, and as a business, we're very excited by it. There are some things that I don't necessarily disagree with. I just think some organizations won't necessarily like. And that's not because Viva is doing it wrong. It's not because Connections is wrong. It's because we're all different. We all have different organizations. And for me, one of the things I think is very important is there was an article in CMS Wire this morning, actually. I think it was yesterday. I read it this morning, and it gave me a stat which I hadn't seen, and it was a Microsoft stat. And it said 52% increase in messages in Teams between 6 p.m. and midnight in the last 18 months. So in the last 18 months, there has been a 52% increase in all of us getting pinged outside of working hours. Now, for me, this is one of the results of the pandemic. It's one of the results of us all rolling out Teams or Slack or these different systems. And you're also, as a direct result of this, seeing a lot of pushback from a lot of users saying, well, we don't necessarily want to be signed into Teams out of hours. And it's a problem that more and more organizations are getting. The reason I'm telling you this is I think, for me, having your intranet or your digital workplace, your employee experience only in Teams could potentially cause more of this, right? It could accelerate those numbers. So whilst I think Teams is a phenomenal product, and it definitely is very valuable to have all this content in Teams, I think it should also potentially not just live in Teams, right? Your intranet's in SharePoint for a reason, because it's asynchronous. The reason we all like email is I can deal with it tomorrow. I don't have to deal with it now. And I think by only having your digital workplace inside of Teams could potentially cause this problem to be exacerbated. The many good things about Viva, though, is of course how we're already working with it. So I mentioned at the start is it validated us. The employee experience was something we've been harking on about for a long time. And Microsoft came out and said, this is where we're focusing our energies, and it was fantastic to hear. And it really makes our job 1,000 times easier to really get over what an employee experience is and what it really means. Because ultimately, the whole reason we do this, right? The whole reason anyone is attending this webinar today is for our users. We build an intranet, we build a digital workplace, we build an employee experience for our users. And Microsoft's doing the same thing. It's trying to focus all of the energy into making their users' life as good and as easy as it can be. So how do we live in harmony with Viva today? What are we starting to do? What are we building? What is coming in our releases, but also what is there right now? Well, Viva Connections, as I've already mentioned, doesn't exist without the data, right? So whether it's a custom SharePoint intranet or whether it's a Beezy instance, Connections all of a sudden becomes a lot more powerful. So for us, Connections is the first and obvious place to start because it works, right? You already have it today, and if you install it today with your Beezy instance, it will work great. And I can show you some examples of this right now. The second one, and the one I'm most excited about. So yeah, not Connections, but the one that I was the most excited about when I saw it is Topics. And to hark back to what Eamon said, it comes on the back of a lot of what they're doing with the Office Graph, with SharePoint Syntex. Now, we've tried for years to really make sure that everything in our product is targeted, right? So we added audience to topics and to channels. We made sure that the navigation could be targeted through global local. We made sure that you could have your own base language, no matter which country you're in, and that you didn't have to write it in English first. You could write it in Spanish or Portuguese or whatever you wanted without having to, each time change. So personalization has been at the forefront of what we've done for the last 2 or 3 years. But all that personalization brings with it, of course, challenges. How do you ring fence search? How do you make sure that those results are more targeted? And Topics has just accelerated that. It's just said, okay, we're going to make your life so much easier. We're going to start to recommend content based on metadata that already exists in Beezy. The reason we've built a flat structured product, although in some places it appears hierarchical, it's a very flat structured product, is we rely heavily on tags. We try our best to make sure that those tags target that content where we can, and if not, we use AD groups. Now, all of a sudden, Viva Topics is enhancing this and improving this, and I'll show you some of the things we're doing in our environment today to try and make the most of what Topics is and is going to be as well. The last 2 pillars that Viva did, Beezy don't do anything with. Like we absolutely don't touch them. So again, for us, it was a really nice, refreshing announcement because it enhances what we do already. So Viva Learning, I told you before, the amount of conversations or customers I've had that said, can we integrate Fuse or these other products into the newsfeed because we want targeted courses to our users. And we have made it work in 2 instances, but it wasn't easy. It wasn't particularly, simple thing to do because these products didn't have connectors. They couldn't work through Flow, and it made life a little bit more difficult. The good news is the way that Viva Learning works is it's actually making these products create these connectors. So it's still the same way we did it before. It's still going to be through Flow. We're still going to use adaptive cards. It doesn't really change the way we do it, but it makes our life a lot easier, and it makes the customer's life 1,000 times easier. So all of a sudden, automatically getting these targeted cards appearing in your Beezy newsfeed or in Connections or wherever you live that shows you information that's relevant to your learning, to your courses, to improving yourself as an individual. Super exciting and pretty much automatic once you've done this hookup, right? So again, making our life and Beezy's life a lot easier. And then insights. I had one of our customers, Monster, a lady called Lorraine, who I've done a few presentations with, so you might have seen some videos on our website with me and her speaking. But she asked me ages ago about this. She said, it was like, I think it was 4.5 years ago. She said, oh, can we build in a way to look at employee happiness? We want to look at things like some of the different employee advocacy stuff, but also bring it the other way and make sure our employees are happy and they're taking time off. And really, they looked at third-party products to integrate into Beezy to do this. Well, Microsoft's gone and changed the game here. They've said, look, we're all about well-being. Now, this particularly is an interesting topic for me. It's the most interesting pillar. Topics is the most exciting, but Insights is the most interesting because you've got all the well-being stuff that's going on. But of course, I've just mentioned in Teams, we're putting everything in Teams where we're struggling to switch off. So I think this is going to change the way that Microsoft also approaches a lot of things. And I'll give you a quick example. Microsoft made a real push a while ago for focus, right? So you probably, everyone on the call who's using Office 365 has the option to focus. You get an email off Cortana says, would you like to focus? You say, yeah, great, accept. And it fills in the blank bits in your diary with time to focus, to get emails, work done, that kind of thing. There's a huge problem with this. The problem is that now focus is the red dot with the white line through. The red dot with the white line through means do not disturb. So now when I've got do not disturb, people think I'm focusing. Oh, I can message him, he's just replying to emails. So these kind of things we've seen now already, and I think Microsoft are going to start learning, and really this employee well-being thing is going to be huge. It's really going to be a big push for pretty much every customer, I think, that we're going to see in the next 12 months. And of course, lastly, on insights, Beezy doesn't do analytics. We're not an analytical product. We're a digital workplace. We have hooks into Google Analytics, Adobe Analytics. We give you Power BI dashboards that Core designed for us, but we're not an analytical platform. Proper analytics requires a proper analytical tool. And this first was announced a while ago with Clarity. I think Microsoft Clarity was the first thing they did. And it was cool. It had heat maps. It allowed you to see user journeys. It had challenges. It allowed you to see information that's potentially sensitive. But again, it's another way they're improving the experience so that employees can understand, or us as content producers, as intranet owners, can understand how employees use our product better. And again, inherently, SharePoint couldn't do this, right? SharePoint doesn't have web analytics. It doesn't tell you bounce rate, ping rate, time spent on pages, heat maps. Clarity does. Viva Insights does. So again, it's improving upon what we were already trying to improve upon. And instead of us saying, go and buy Google Analytics, we can say no, because Insights is taking care of this for you. So again, another way that it really enhances what Beezy is doing. So what are we doing today? Let me give you a few quick examples. So firstly, this is Beezy out of the box. Most of you who are customers will recognize this completely. We can already start to integrate things like Viva Insights, right? So we can already start to look at the well-being, the links from Insights. So that's kind of a nice thing. One of the things I think that is really cool, and I talked about topics before, is in topics at the moment, or in Beezy today, you can follow tags, right? So you can follow tags and you can filter via tags and you can find content via tags. You can have content pushed to you as well based on who you are, those kind of things. And when you search for pages, you can look via tags. So everything in our product is about audience targeting and tags. When I log in as this lady here, Daisy, I see these pages because it knows who I am, right? It's saying, hey, we know you work in communications, you should see the communications pages. So already we've got that targeting. But all of a sudden with topics, this becomes a little more powerful. So when Daisy gets her emails and she's getting a little summary of all the news stories that have been created, we're baking in topics. And it's picking up this keyword, right? This is a tag in Beezy, but it's picking it up and saying, hey, this tag is being used an awful lot in this particular newsletter or in this set of news articles. So we're going to create a topics page for it. And the good news is that the topics center, the Microsoft Topics Center that is created, this is all pulling in existing Beezy content. So when I'm chatting with the bot, right, when I'm saying, you know, who knows about VTOL, it'll look at the product, it'll look at our tags, it'll look at our endorsements, and it'll say, hey, Dave, if you're interested in VTOL, then you need to go and speak to Max, right? Or you need to go and you need to read this news story, or you need to read this document. It's, again, using that intelligence, that office graph that we already had, this SharePoint syntax. It's using all these wonderful pieces of technology, the Project Cortex. It's given it a name, which is topics, but it's now allowing that serendipity, that findability to become 5, 6, 7 times more powerful than it was. And again, Beezy isn't really having to do anything different. We've already got the tags, we've already got the audiences, we've already got the way that our topics work, and Microsoft Topics comes over the top of it and kind of knits it all together. It knits our endorsements, it knits our tags, and it knits some of the AI and the character recognition that automatically adds those kind of tags to content that we don't know exists. And again, this question's been around forever, right? Hey, Dave, is there any way inside of Beezy that we can automate tags, that we can recognize keywords? There is, but they're third-party products. They're not particularly tested inside of Microsoft, inside of SharePoint. So in fact, there was one that came out about 2 years ago that was pretty cool, but now Microsoft's giving it. It's giving it to everybody. The idea that we can start to make this serendipity, this findability, so much more powerful than it's ever been. Learning. So learning's tricky. I did have the public preview. They've taken it off me. This isn't strictly learning. I mean, this is me taking a link from one of our learning pages that we have and plonk it in our hero. But I really like the idea of what it's trying to do. In fact, I'm going to very quickly show you an environment that I shouldn't show you. This is our real life internal version. So we've enabled, of course, some of the dashboard, the connections dashboard inside of Beezy. This is real life Beezy. And you can see here, we're getting some of those learning things start to appear. So the idea is that all of a sudden we're being targeted with content, just like we are today in our Beezy newsfeed. You know, it knows that I work in this community. It's trying to ask me about Salesforce. It knows I work in project X is asking me about this document, we're just enhancing our newsfeed, adding more and more content that is coming from the world of Viva Learning. And for me, again, very, very exciting. Something that, Insights, Viva Insights. See, even I get confused. This is very exciting for us because, again, it's just enhancing our newsfeed. The learning stuff I've mentioned already. I don't have anything in learning to show you, as I say, because it's not enabled at the moment. The preview is not enabled. When it is, we were very excited, as I say, when they bought LinkedIn Learning. It really allowed a lot of customers to start integrating that into our newsfeed. And I think this is, again, just going to accelerate that. And then lastly, of course, look, what is Connections? How does Connections work? Well, this is Viva Connections. So I've enabled it inside of our demo environment. And it's basically, I hate the word, but it's an iframe to your intranet. So today, how does it work? Well, it allows me to use Beezy inside of Teams. Realistically, we already had this. We've had this for a long time. We had the Teams app, so you could use Beezy in Teams. But Insights gives you a more structured framework in which to do it. And of course, it has its own app. You can pin it. You can do all the things you can do in Beezy. It doesn't really change our life here. We can post to Yammer. We can post to SharePoint communities. We can look at our news feed. We can like. We can comment. We can read our news. It's everything that you kind of expect in Beezy, but in Teams. Now, of course, it goes a step further with what they're doing with the dashboard. And again, this is where you need, I think, a product. I think you need a solution because, again, I'm not telling you that Microsoft have done this the wrong way because they haven't. They're a fantastic product for building platforms. But do I think that having a right-hand side navigation and a left-hand side navigation and a middle navigation to find targeted content is the best policy? No, I don't. I think that we know from Gartner, from Forrester, from LinkedIn, from Facebook, from every single report that exists, your homepage is where you get your users, right? So single page applications, homepage, keeping them in this one modal pop-up, everything they do remaining on the homepage. He says, clicking a link to another page, everything you do should remain here, right? So I think adding a separate navigation on the right-hand side with targeted content, you're losing valuable real estate. I would rather it sits in the one newsfeed, the timeline, the wall, the thing we're all familiar with in Facebook and LinkedIn and Twitter. But again, it's something that we can work with Microsoft on. It's a platform, right? We can make it work for our users so that we know that they're using their intranet, their digital workplace, the best way possible for them. Okay, I've covered what's available today. As I say, not as exciting as what's coming because there's not much available today in Connections, but it is genuinely the most exciting set of technology they've released for a long time. So I'll pause here, ask if there's any questions, and yeah, back to you, Eamon, I suppose.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks, Eamon, for those presentations. I would just like to launch the last poll because we do have some time, so I'll launch that now for everyone. So if you haven't started with MS Viva, what is the biggest thing holding you back? So I'll just give everyone 30-40 seconds to give their answer there. Okay, I can see people are voting already. We're up to 50% of people who have voted. We'll give it an extra 10-15 seconds and then we'll close that. Okay, I'll close the poll and I'll share those results on the screen. Any comments there, Dave?
The same problem Eamon had. I cannot see it now because it thinks I'm still presenting. So I cannot see the results now.
Okay, maybe Eamon can see it, but otherwise I can explain. So got 83% of people saying I don't have enough information on MS Viva yet. And then in second place on 17%, MS Viva doesn't appear to meet my business needs. And okay. the other response is 0%. So they are the two biggest things holding people back with MS Viva.
I think the main takeaway here is, we have a lot of previews, right? So we're a vendor, and so a core, we get to see a lot of the cool stuff that's coming. We've been playing with Project Cortex, SharePoint Syntax for an awful long time. So for us, this is super exciting stuff. But if you don't have those previews, and if you have just watched the Ignite videos, then yeah, there's a lot of unknowns, and I think that's going to be the case for the 6 to 12 months. So I'm not overly surprised, but I do think, yeah, everyone should be excited about what this means for the industry. It's kicked on our industry so quickly, and if nothing else, even Beezy, take Beezy out, it's meant that we all value the employee experience more, and that is only a good thing as far as I'm concerned.
Sure, Dave. I've hit the poll, but I can see your beautiful children on the screen now. No problem. Okay, we did have a few questions that did come in, so we've got a few minutes, 10 minutes to go through some of these. I have a question. The first question is for Eamon. So how does Core help companies with MS Viva implementations? Are there certain workshops you run there, Eamon, helping your clients?
Yeah, I'm just going to reopen my slide deck, and I'm not sure, can we share my screen again? Because that's a good question. It's one I have at the bottom of the deck, but do you mind sharing my screen again on that one?
Sure, I can make you presenter, Eamon. Let me just do that. Dave.
Okay, let's move that out of the way. So hopefully you can see my screen at the minute.
Yeah, we can.
I mean, what I wanted to put up on screen, I'll put it in presentation mode so we can see it a little bit better, is we've actually been working with Microsoft. So anybody who's got a Microsoft subscription, E3 or above, will most likely have capability of getting involved in one of the Microsoft funded employee experience workshops. And they've only changed in the last month. I can't remember exactly. I think it was early July. Microsoft announced the news. So there are, in the Viva space, and I think it really goes back to the point where people not enough information about Viva. And I think Dave highlighted this really well around that, stuff in the public preview, private preview. It's extremely difficult to get on some of these things. The learning preview opened in April, and within a day they shut it down because of so much demand. So one of the best ways, I think, to do two things: get a bit of exposure to the product, but also to understand where it fits in your organization, and does it really fit? Because I think that was one of the questions on there as well. One of the comments in the poll is the employee experience workshop. So these are funded by Microsoft. There are two flavors. There's the one I have on screen, which is generically across a 2-3 day engagement, covering topics, connections, learnings, and then help you build a plan as to how you engage with Viva. And integrations with Beezy, integrations with other technologies are all part of understanding the plan you build and how you build this out. So if you come back to us or via your Microsoft Partner Manager, we'll be able to see if you're eligible for these workshops. We haven't had anybody who hasn't been eligible yet, and Microsoft, up until the end of this month, is in August, are pretty much putting everybody that we nominate, they're putting them through the program. So funded, it's about 3 days worth of effort, and it takes you through the 3 main topics. They've broken up analytics into its own workshop. So there's 2 flavors. There's the topics, connections, and learning workshop, and then there's an insights workshop. So it's probably the most effective way we've seen of helping people understand what is it. Let's have a look at it. Let's see how it works, and how can we deploy it, and what benefit will we get from the technology.
Thanks, Eamon, for that answer there. I do have a question for David also. So in your opinion, which MS Viva module do you think complements Beezy the most?
Complements. So, I mean, topics is the one I'm probably most excited about. I think it just makes life, it just enhances so many things, and findability. We always hear findability searches is a problem for nearly every intranet that we replace. So that's probably the one I'm most excited about. But I think in regards to complements, probably insights, I'd say. Yeah, insights for me, because we just don't do anything there already, and it's so cool. It's so needed, particularly the last 18 months. This whole, I think Eamon said at the start, replicate the world's cooler, understand the culture of the organization, these kind of things. And I think when you're looking at insights and what it's already starting to do with Project Cortex, and what the Cortana analytics stuff that we're getting, and the emails and employee well-being and these kind of things, it has a long way to go, but I think it's never been more important. So yeah, I'll go with insights.
Perfect. Thanks for that. A question for you, Eamon. A lot of these Viva modules won't be fully released until the end of the year. So do you think it's better to get started with MS Viva next year when everything is out in the market, or should we be preparing for this now?
I think it's actually, that question is almost the perfect question. I think preparing for it now is important. I think trying to get too engaged with it will lead to a little bit of disappointment. So I think preparation, Dave touched on it a little bit earlier, you know, this isn't about just turning on Beezy and connections and the whole thing works. This is about making sure you're ready for it, you've done the prep, you're audiencing, all the things you need to do to get content in the right place. So, I mean, we're in the middle of a number of POCs, proof of concepts of customers, but our simple advice is, let's wait till next year before we get into anything that's anywhere near production, but let's prime and prep over the coming months. And that's exactly what we're doing with a couple of customers. So we're using this kind of final few months into next year to get ready and prep before we launch into full-scale implementations.
Thanks for that, Eamon. I do have one final question for David. I think you talked about this, Dave, during your webinar. Someone has asked, can my company intranet just live in MS Teams with these 4 Viva modules? Or would, yeah.
Yeah, it can, of course. Yeah, absolutely can. My point is always, you know, I spend my life speaking to customers, right? And I spend my life talking about synchronous and asynchronous collaboration and what does this mean? You know, like I said this morning, literally this morning, you sent me a link, Josh, a CMS Wire article, which was really interesting. It kind of validates everything that I've been saying for the last 12 months. I don't think you should live in a synchronous chat app. I think it's unhealthy, and I'm an advocate for this because I'm a first-hand experience of this. I work a lot on the East Coast of America, and I am running workshops tonight till 10 p.m. So I've got a long day today, but it didn't stop my colleagues in Spain emailing me or messaging me on Teams at 8 a.m. this morning. And I think the problem, if we live our life in a synchronous chat-based app, is that we no longer work from home. Home is our work. So we're now bombarded at all hours of the day. And for some people, this is normal. We're used to this, right? Some people, we've done this forever and we're fine with it. Our wives probably don't agree with it, or our husbands probably don't agree with it, but it's something that I think is becoming more prevalent as an issue and a challenge for a lot of organizations and a lot of people. You know, how do I turn off if I'm living in a chat-based app? Because most of us don't check our emails after 5, 6 o'clock, right? But nearly all of us can't avoid that push notification. It's the same reason WhatsApp was so successful. It's invasive. It's the same reason instant messaging works, because it's invasive. You get a big push notification, tells you what you're missing, and Teams does the same thing. And I think that inherently is a challenge if you just live in Teams. But in answer to your question, Josh, yes, of course you can just have all of this in Teams. Should you? Different question.
Thanks for that, Dave. Okay, so unfortunately we're running at the top of the hour here. We've got 3 more minutes and then I'll let people jump to their next meetings. But I just wanted to say a quick thanks to David and Eamon today for your interesting presentations. Any questions that we haven't answered, we will of course get back to you via email. But also please don't hesitate to reach out to David or Eamon. I'm sure they'd be happy to answer any further questions that you may have. The webinar recording, we will send that out tomorrow via email, so please look out for that. And I would just like to say, finally, thank you everyone for joining. I'm going to let you get back to your summer holidays or meetings for the rest of the day. So thank you and goodbye, everyone.
Thank you all. Cheers.
Thank you.